are listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joined with me, as always, is Zishan.
Yo.
Alright, man. We are officially in the NBA offseason for the 2020-2021 season. And it's madness.
Yeah, bro, it's going pretty crazy right now. Just before we start to officially our second episode on YouTube.
If you haven't checked out the first one, definitely check it out. For those of you viewing this on YouTube, the card's going to be up there to let you know.
Yeah, definitely like and subscribe on YouTube. And as always for our audio listeners, bro, it's going to be the same thing. Ain't nothing changed for audio, bro.
Yeah.
It's still the same show.
Same great show. But yeah, the offseason officially kicked off this past Monday, the 16th. And holy shit, man, there's a ton to go over in today's episode.
Yeah, bro. It's like a lot of people were thinking this was going to be like a mild offseason, but just with the way the offseason shaped up, I think just more logistically wise, it's gone pretty crazy because now teams have to like condense their timelines by a lot.
And we kind of figured this was going to happen considering like they're like the time, the window for when next season is going to start is just so short that teams are just trying to like, you know, quickly fit their teams together. But yeah, we're actually recording this as the NBA draft is happening live. So if we don't cover the NBA draft stuff, we will do that in a future episode. So definitely stay tuned for that. But in this episode, we wanted to focus more on some of the blockbuster trades and rumors that have been surrounding the NBA for the last few days. And there's a lot of them. So yeah, man, we're not going to waste any time. The first trade we want to talk about is probably one of the biggest trades that happened over these last few days. And
it pretty much signaled the start of the offseason.
Pretty much, yeah. It was one of the first like major splashes that was made, and that was the Chris Paul trade. Chris Paul was officially traded from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Phoenix Suns. Yeah, I know. We actually talked about this, I believe, in last episode. So
it was last episode, actually.
So if you haven't done so, definitely check that out. Now, we weren't too confident that this was going to happen. We were kind of like, hey, this would be interesting if this were to happen. But we weren't really 100% sure how it would come about. But the trade actually went through. It was Chris Paul and Abdel Nader going to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre Jr., Ty Jerome, Jalen Leck, and a 2022 first-round pick.
Now, we actually just got a Woj bomb. Was it a Woj bomb?
It was a Woj bomb.
A Woj bomb just right now, before we started the episode, too. That we were going to talk about Ricky Rubio's fit on OKC, but he just got moved to Minnesota. So he's going back to Minnesota, along with the 25th and 28th picks.
And OKC gets the 17th pick in this year's draft.
So for a package involving the 17th pick pretty much is what it was. So I guess we can quickly go over that right now.
I mean, you're going to see a lot of OKC in this episode just because OKC made a ton of moves. And I think a lot of it has to do with the direction.
OKC is they're pulling their Boston Celtics.
They are literally pulling their Boston Celtics. They're getting their war chest of assets. But I think as far as getting these picks, flipping Rubio for assets, it's a smart move, man. It just shows their direction as a franchise. They want to rebuild. They're restructuring their roster, and they're taking the requisite steps to do so.
Now, who knows if Ricky Rubio is actually going to stay on Minnesota? That's
to be seen.
That's to be determined.
Because they do have D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, they do have D'Angelo Russell. If they were to keep Ricky Rubio, it definitely wouldn't be a bad choice, especially considering D'Angelo Russell is more of a 2 than a 1. And you always would like a pure playmaker on the roster. And Ricky Rubio is definitely one of the best in the NBA at doing that. Especially getting the ball to a guy like D'Angelo Russell, guys like Karl Anthony Towns.
I mean, the familiarity is also there with Minnesota and the organization. Like, Ryan Saunders has been on the staff and Ricky Rubio is on the team. So that's the level of familiarity that they're bringing in to the organization.
Yeah, now if he does get moved, we're going to see Minnesota probably get some assets back, probably some win-now type of players. Yeah. So it'll definitely be interesting in terms of that trade. But moving back to what the main trade was, in terms of what the pros and the cons were, so I think number one, the most important thing I think for Phoenix is that they get a win-now player in Chris Paul. Chris Paul already has a relationship with Devin Booker. We've seen videos
They're
of
already
them
in the gym.
They're already in the gym. And they get a potential of $11 million in cap space to make more playoffs win now moves. So this clearly, I think, the intent of this was to show Devin Booker, though he does have a couple of years left still on his extension contract, the intent is clearly to show Devin Booker, hey, we're committed to winning right now. We're going to help you win no matter what. Devin Booker's already, talked about how much he hates losing, and he's never had a winning season in his career so far. So this move primarily was to signal to Devin Booker, not just Chris Paul for right now, but once Chris Paul's contract expires, we're going to be looking for the next player to help you get to that next level and get this team to that next level.
And a lot of that has to do with how they performed in the bubble. Now, they went 8-0 in the bubble. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it to the playoffs, as magical of a run they went on. But you just saw with Monty Williams being the coach, the strides that they took as an organization, as a team. They want to make the playoffs now, which I think is the right thing to do. Also, I took a peek at their contract situation. They have a lot of players on team options, so if they decide not to go with those players on those team options, they could potentially have $11 million of cap space to make even more moves to further extend their chances of going on a playoff run this next season.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in terms of their bubble experience was just the maturity they showed.
Yeah.
Like how much they improved from what they were in the regular season and then into the bubble season, how much better they performed. And again, we've talked about it a lot of times, but major credit to Monty Williams for that. Again, it was also primarily due to the fact that DeAndre Ayton did get suspended for like 25 games for his PED violation, which really screwed over their season because they did have a nice beginning start of the season. And obviously the DeAndre Ayton suspension happened, and that pretty much threw their season out of whack. But flipping things over to OKC's side, this was also a very good trade for them. They got rid of Chris Paul's contract. They got rid of a guy that doesn't fit on their timeline, but they also get some nice pieces back in Kelly Oubre Jr. And of course the draft pick to add to their war chest of draft picks that Sam Presti already has.
Even Ty Jerome isn't even a bad pickup. He was a first round draft pick in last year's draft by Phoenix. And again, they were able to flip Ricky Rubio, as we mentioned earlier, for even more assets. So it was not a bad trade at all for both sides. I think this is a big step in the right direction for James Jones, as he really hasn't made that defining move as a general manager yet. But I think this is one of those trades that you can actually look back on and say this is a big step for James Jones.
Yeah, even going back to the Kelly Oubre thing, OKC's main piece that they acquired from this trade was Kelly Oubre Jr., who had a fantastic season last year.
He's gonna be nice with Shea.
He's definitely gonna be a good player for them. But the thing that made him expendable on Phoenix's part is you clearly saw in the bubble that their wings of the future. Though Kelly Oubre Jr. is not old at all, he's 25.
Yeah, he's pretty young.
He's still pretty young, but clearly their wings of the future were Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, who both played great in the bubble.
I mean, I've liked Mikal Bridges since the draft, when he got drafted. So, he's been a player of mine that I've actually wanted to see.
Cam Johnson was the question that a lot of people had, considering he was a 4-year college player, but he showed why there is value in older college guys. His transition to the NBA was a lot smoother than a lot of people expected. And then in the bubble, he raised his game, even playing, power forward.
I think Mikal Bridges was also like a 3 or 4 year guy. Like he was in Villanova for quite some time.
Yeah.
But no, definitely a lot of positives on both sides. The only downside, I think, or the only con we can see out of this trade is Chris Paul maybe getting hit with some age issues.
Injuries,
aging. That might play a factor in the next season. But hey, that's the gamble the Suns have decided that they're willing to take in order to have a shot at making it to the playoffs.
Not to mention that although CP3, I think an important fact that does get lost in this is that he does reunite with Monty Williams, who was his coach at one time in New Orleans. One thing that can be a bit of an issue, but I think it will get smoothed over as the season goes on. But I think you were alluding to this right now as well. His fit with Devin Booker, And also his fit within the offense. As we know, Monty Williams is a very spread happy. He likes to spread the ball around on offense, whereas Chris Paul is more of a isolation type of player. Though he is a great passer, but it's kind of like the Rondo thing, where hold the ball then get the assist kind of thing. But again, Chris Paul is one of the greatest passers, but he is more of an ISO player than I think Monty Williams' system will allow him to be. So there's gonna be that sort of middle ground that they're gonna have to come.
But you see, like what Chris Paul was able to do in OKC, how he's willing to. He's been showing that he's been able to adapt his game to fit the style that the team needs him to play. Especially we saw that in Houston too.
I was just gonna say that, yeah.
But no, I think it could work. I need to see a little bit more pieces around Devin Booker and Chris Paul to put them into the playoffs definitively. But great move. I was actually alluding to this. So what do you overall grade this trade at?
Out of 10 or something?
Yeah, like A, B, C. Okay. What do you think?
I think it's I would say probably A minus, A maybe. Like the only thing again you were talking about the con that kills it is obviously the risk of what happens with Chris Paul. If he gets injured especially. But in terms of grading it as of right now, again, in terms of trades, we really never know how well or how good the trade works out until maybe like 2-3 years later. Yeah, we saw that primarily. I think the thing that comes off the top of my head is the Kyrie Irving Isaiah Thomas trade.
Yeah,
where at the time it looked like a pretty even trade, and then we saw how lopsided it became, and then it ended up screwing both teams over in the long run. So,
yeah, no, that's
it was a weird situation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one. I think it's like it's a solid, like for me, it's a little bit of an A minus A trade. I definitely think both sides have benefited from this move. I think it's definitely a move that we weren't really expecting to happen, just based on the fact that even in the last episode we were questioning how would Phoenix make a move like this work, without giving up, a guy like Kelly Oubre Jr. But I guess.
Again, he became expendable after Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson's playing the bubble.
So
that's how the NBA is, bro.
Yep. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this trade. But that was a huge blockbuster that started us off in this crazy offseason. Which brings us into the next trade, or a trade and then or two trades, but then one of them didn't quite happen. We'll discuss that. But it's actually surrounding the Milwaukee Bucks. Now the Bucks had probably one of the toughest tasks of this offseason. They needed to convince Giannis to sign the Supermax, but also improve a team that was the best team in the league. So
at least regular season.
In the regular season. So how do you do that? And for the Bucks, their first major trade that they made was they acquired Jrue Holiday from the New Orleans Pelicans.
Their answer to the Giannis problem was pretty much go all in right now and hope that it convinces, the attitude convinces Giannis to stay. Yeah. The issue is why these sort of moves were not done before.
And we'll discuss.
Again, that does sort of, Giannis does have a part to play in that as well.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is right now. They're trying to do whatever they can to hope Giannis stays. And in terms of the Jrue Holiday deal, obviously you guys all saw that the Milwaukee Bucks got Jrue Holiday. And the Pelicans got Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, 3 first-round picks, and 2 future pick swaps.
And if this sounds familiar, this is exactly the type of haul that the Pelicans got for Anthony Davis last season.
There's a very David Griffin type of move, pretty much.
It is almost the same deal if we're looking at it. The only difference is that Bledsoe and Hill are older players versus what they got from the Lakers in Lonzo and Ingram and Josh.
And also, Jrue Holiday is a lot worse than Anthony Davis.
Yeah, I can say that. Yeah,
I mean, Jrue Holiday is a good player. He's a good player, but AD is way up there.
Yeah, he's not AD. But yeah, in terms of the benefits of this trade, you were actually alluding to this. For the Bucks, this is a completely win now move. This is to show Giannis they want to compete. They're here, they're saying, "Hey man, we're gonna get you the pieces. We want to win a championship. We want you to be a part of our future." And Jrue Holiday is a nice player who is going to improve the Bucks right away. He's a solid defender. He on top of already the great defenders that they have in the team, including Giannis, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez. They adding Jrue Holiday to that even makes that even better. He's a guy who can space the floor, can facilitate. He's a great piece for this Bucks team. For the Pelicans, flipping things to their side, they got a lot of assets in this trade. Like I think as far as uh the trade that would get him the most assets for Drew Holiday, I don't see anybody else topping this unless someone pulls the Clippers and gives them 5 first-round picks unprotected.
Yeah, I think this was like the most they could probably get for this trade. And credit to David Griffin, he really pulled this off pretty nice, man.
The Bucks clearly showed how desperate they were because there was a lot of teams interested in Drew Holiday's services, but the Bucks were like, "Hey, we're gonna give you everything."
Yeah, bro. I mean, again, it points to the thing of this was as much of a mental sort of trade than it was just physical sort of trade. With the players, it was more about the mentality of trying to convince Giannis to stay. Again, you were talking about it. Drew Holiday can do pretty much everything you ask of his position on the court. He's one of the best defenders on the wing. He's a good passer. He can shoot. He'll add to what the Bucks already have and more. And then flipping things over to the Pelicans side, you get a lot of assets for a contract that is going to be expiring pretty soon. So, not to mention the fact that you do get, good role players in Eric Bledsoe and George Hill who can help, advance you to that next step right now. But in terms of the cons of this deal or some of the disadvantages of this deal, first of all, off the top of my head, the Bucks gave up a lot for Drew Holiday. Again, this kind of a desperation move as we were talking about, but still, it doesn't make it hurt any less. They had to trade away the best, statistical 3-point shooter in the league in George Hill this year. And then obviously, we know Drew Holiday's contract situation, so he could be a rental if he declines his player option next year. So the Bucks really did give up a lot. Again, I'm not the biggest. We've talked about Eric Bledsoe a lot. I'm not the biggest Eric Bledsoe fan, but he is an All-NBA defender. He is a good player.
Regular season Bledsoe is actually a good player. It's just playoff Bledsoe when he becomes Drew Bledsoe. That's the issue.
Again, it's depth. I think the biggest thing also that they're losing. George Hill and Eric Bledsoe
that's huge.
were two of their biggest mainstays at the guard positions, and for them to be gone and you only get. I mean, not you only because Drew Holiday is a good player, but you are losing some of your depth.
Yeah, and again, we've seen now in championship contending teams, depth is very important, especially when you're going on deep playoff runs. So we'll see if this hurts the Bucks in the long run, but it's definitely a lot for them to give up. Not to mention, this doesn't guarantee Giannis is going to sign that Supermax. Like, Giannis doesn't have to sign it this offseason. He can wait till next offseason and get the same money. So this doesn't guarantee anything for the Bucks, but it's, again, what you were saying, it more of a mental kind of trade in the sense that they're trying to convince Giannis to stay in Milwaukee.
I think going back to your thing about his Supermax extension too, do you really want to sign Giannis to a Supermax extension?
Well, does Giannis want to sign the Supermax?
Well, both sides do they really, really want to do it? Because obviously we know for the next CBA agreement, the Supermax is probably going to be gone because it's been a massive, massive failure.
Ask Russell Westbrook.
And yeah,
there's John Wall.
Pretty much been no advantages to it other than the fact that the player gets paid. But again, and then afterwards they ask for a trade, right?
Yeah, that's a whole other topic because star players in this league demanding trades and breaking contracts, it's becoming a little ridiculous, honestly. But that's a topic for another episode or even later on in this one. But yeah, no, this doesn't guarantee anything about Giannis signing that Supermax. And finally, the other con that we can see for the New Orleans Pelicans would be, well, honestly, there isn't any con to the New Orleans Pelicans. Like, they got a haul for Drew Holiday.
You did lose a mainstay in Drew Holiday who had been part of that culture and part of that team for the last, how long has he been there? He's been there for a bit.
For some time, yeah.
He's been there for a bit of time. So you did lose like a guy, a very important locker room presence, someone who has been one of your most valuable players for the last handful of years. So I guess that is one con you can say for the New Orleans Pelicans. But again, Drew Holiday wasn't really on their timeline. And not to mention the fact that they did get 2 quality guards in return for Drew Holiday plus picks. So I think it worked out as well as you could have expected on New Orleans' side.
Yeah, there's not a ton of risk on New Orleans' side. Speaking of risk, this is, restricted free agency is a very tricky type of, thing to deal with for organizations, because you never really know if a team is going to match or if a player is going to agree to come to your organization for whatever contract you try to sign them to. And this is what happened with the Bucks trying to go after Bogdan Bogdanovic, who is an RFA with the Sacramento Kings. There was a proposed sign and trade deal where the Bucks would get Bogdanovic and Justin James, and the Sacramento Kings would get Dante DiVincenzo, Ersan Ilyasova, and DJ Wilson. So this was apparently a deal that was already done, but there was reports earlier today saying that Bogdanovic didn't agree to the sign and trade with the Bucks. He didn't want to go to the Bucks, and he basically killed this deal before it even got started.
Yeah, so when the deal was announced, I think a lot of people were, especially Bucks fans, I think rightfully so, were very hyped because they got a combo guard, a wing player who can drive the ball a bit, mainly a shooter, he can shoot, but also a great facilitator. Someone who's very good all around offensively to add, to the collection of players that they have.
It was rumored that the Bucks were targeting Bogdanovic. Like we talked about this in a past episode.
Yeah, and when they acquired him, this automatically a lot of people were talking about. Yeah, a lot of people were talking about how this move gave the Bucks the best starting lineup in the league. Arguable. I don't know off the top of my head.
It's a good starting five.
It's definitely one of the best. Good. It's one of the best starting fives in the league.
Yeah.
But
no,
again, we don't know why he declined it. There might have been something happening behind the scenes. Probably something contractually that happened.
Yeah, we don't even know the money really. What did he actually sign for? Because free agency hasn't actually opened up yet.
So I think this really put a dampening on Milwaukee's, I think, spirits, because of the fact that Milwaukee was looking at adding Drew Holiday and Bogdanovic, and then now the Bogdan thing just killed the vibe. It killed the vibe pretty much for Milwaukee. I think one underrated aspect of this is, I think, the connection of the Buddy Hield situation in Sacramento. So, that's another topic, but what happens with the Buddy Hield situation, we don't know, because maybe now that Bogdanovic is gone, Buddy Hield wants to stay. But again, it looked like from the reports earlier on in the year that Buddy Hield wanted out no matter what, and he just pretty much hated the Kings front office.
Yeah,
not really. Not
comforting.
Really. Yeah, not comforting. But again, not surprising considering how many players have hated the Kings front office. So
true.
Yeah.
They actually have a reputation now for this shit. But it sucks. I think for the Bucks trying to make moves. But you know what? The one silver lining I will put in for the Bucks is that they aren't trading away all their bench, for Bogdan Bogdanovic. Dante DiVincenzo is actually a really nice player. I actually really like him.
He's a really good young
Ersan's contract, I think you could flip for something still. It sucks that DJ Wilson is still on the team, but we have to live with him still.
It is what it is. You're talking about a major depth that will have been sacrificed along with already Eric Bledsoe and George Hill.
If this deal went through, I think they would only have 7 players under contract.
Yeah.
Which you need more. And again, they would have been right at the cap, so they wouldn't have any money to.
Pretty much, they will have filled out the rest of the roster with minimums. So, but again, that's kind of what you got to deal with when you're trying to build a contender, especially with getting guys like Drew Holiday and Bogdanovic.
Yeah. So that was basically the moves that the Bucks made, or the move the Bucks made and the one they tried to make. They got Drew Holiday. What would you kind of rank the Drew Holiday trade?
I would say a B+, I think. Because, again, from the perspective of you're trying to show Giannis that you want to win now, and you're trying to appease him, so that you got to pull off something. And the fact that you got Drew Holiday, who was one of the most sought-after players on the market, I think is a huge deal. But again, we're talking about the depth that they sacrificed, not to mention the picks. Again, you're in a contending situation, so the picks won't matter as much to you. But it's always good to have some backups in case your star player bolts. And as Raptors fans, I think we can attest to that too. we're in a good position because we had a bunch of good young players. But again, it would have been nicer to not be picking in the draft like 28th, 29th every year.
I mean, I'll say this: I'm more under on the trade. I think I'll give him about a B minus because I just think this is a huge gamble for the Bucks for something that they don't even know if it is a guarantee or not. But yeah, man, like I don't know. I like that they're going for it. I like that they're making moves, but at the same time, they're sacrificing a lot to make sure that Giannis stays. We were actually going to move on into our next trade, which we had noted down. But we have some breaking news of a trade that just went down.
Yeah, I just saw that.
It just literally went down. So I actually am reading this off my phone. So it's a 3-team trade between the Brooklyn Nets, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Detroit Pistons. So this trade apparently involves the Brooklyn Nets getting Landry Shamet from the Clippers. The Clippers receive Luke Kennard from the Pistons, and the Pistons get the number 19th pick in this draft, the 2020 draft. This is actually a pretty interesting trade in my opinion. The fact that, Brooklyn was able to get a player like Shamet is pretty darn good. Shamet was a solid player for
He's a very good player.
Very good player. And you know what?
Player.
Clippers getting Luke Kennard is not a bad substitute.
Here's the thing though. For the Clippers' point of view, I don't really know why they would.
It's a very similar player. Like,
not to mention Shamet was on a $3 million? He was on his rookie contract.
Well, I believe Luke Kennard is also on like a rookie deal or something like that. So they're both on cheap contracts.
Again, Luke Kennard is a bigger player than Landry Shamet. I guess you can say he has more potential in terms of what he can do with the ball than Landry Shamet.
Yeah.
But still, in terms of the Clippers' return, I don't know. I think the main thing is Brooklyn's return, where they got Landry Shamet, who is one of the best shooters in the league.
So Luke Kennard has a 1-year deal at $5 million. So what is Shamet on? I think he's on he has 2 or 3 more years left.
Okay, so I guess flexibility is what the Clippers get.
Yeah.
And you're not sacrificing that much considering they're kind of the same type of player. But again, going back to Brooklyn side of things, you now have more depth. In addition to if they re-sign Joe Harris, you have 2 of the best shooters in the league off your bench.
That's gonna be really nice.
Their offense is gonna be insane. If we'll talk about this later on, but if their team stays how it is right now, their offense is going to be pretty crazy, man. It's going to be major firepower.
And as far as the Pistons is concerned, I mean, like, we knew Luke Kennard was going to be traded. They could have kept him, to be fair. Like, being a rebuilding organization, he's a nice player to keep. But flipping him for another first-round pick is, I think, a pretty solid move for the Pistons. So, yeah, that was some breaking news that we had live on the show that we wanted to throw into this episode. Moving on to a trade that actually happened right after we recorded last week's episode. I hate it when it happens, but we just have to live with it. It basically involves the Los Angeles Lakers acquiring Dennis Schroder from the OKC Thunder. So the Lakers essentially in this move get Dennis Schroder in exchange for Danny Green, who is flipped in another deal. We'll talk about that later. And the 28th overall pick in this draft. As far as the pros of this trade, the Lakers get a solid depth point guard who we saw can create and score, while also he can space the floor for LeBron and AD. Like, he's a young player. He's a spark plug off the bench. He can do some decent facilitating, decent defender.
He's a very fiery player as well. So he injects that kind of energy as you're talking about. Bench spark. He could have been the 6th man of the year this past season.
I felt like he deserved it, to be fair.
He shot very well from 3 as well, which was a bit surprising to me. But again, he's never been a bad 3-point shooter, but it's just, it's not, he's always been more of a driver and a slasher. But again, considering, how valuable 3-point shooting is next to LeBron and Anthony Davis, the Lakers definitely got a good player out of this. Not to mention that he won't hurt your flexibility and hurt your cap too much because of the fact that he is on an expiring deal. And then I think final point is that if Rajon Rondo does leave, you now have some insurance that now you have a good, capable point guard on the team, just in case Rondo leaves again. But for the Thunder's point of view, they did get to add another pick to their war chest of first-round picks. So, again, Sam Presti's pulling a Danny Ainge, and they're just accumulating as many picks as
I think they have like 17 picks over the next first-round picks over the next 5 drafts. I think it was something like that I read.
And it was 17 a bit of time ago. Now with all the moves, I don't know what it is. It's probably a
it's
bit up or a
something
bit
interesting.
down. But, they got another pick out of it. And then they also got Danny Green's expiring contract, which
They
I
flipped
guess
for even
which
more
they
moves.
flipped, and we're about to talk about that as well. In terms of some downsides, I think the one main downside I would say is for the Thunder's point of view that was the market for Dennis Schroder that bad that you couldn't have gotten anything better?
I mean, they got a first round pick in this year's draft, which I think a lot of other teams weren't willing to give up. And not to mention, I didn't really see a lot of teams needing another point guard, especially because I think Dennis Schroder wants to be like a starter caliber, or at least a 6-man caliber guard. So I don't know if a lot of teams needed that. Which means the Lakers were probably among the only team, besides maybe the Clippers, who needed it, but the Clippers don't have any assets. So
yeah, again, it does point obviously there wasn't too many opportunities for the Thunder, but still, Danny Green and a 28th overall pick for arguably the 6th man of the year.
Well, we got to also
That's
factor
a
into
bit-
what they flipped Danny Green for.
Yeah, so I guess we can talk about that right now too.
Well, what would you first of all grade the Schroder trade just based on what it is?
For LA, I would definitely say and honestly, I would probably say an A minus.
Yeah,
because he
sure.
pretty much gave up nothing. No offense to Danny Green, but he was garbage.
Laker fans wanted him gone. Let's be real.
He was terrible. Let's be real. And as a Raptors fan, we can attest to him being garbage in the playoffs.
I mean,
we love Danny Green. Don't get me wrong, but
Danny shouldn't have left. Just my 2 cents.
But he played terrible. But the Lakers got a great point guard, a guy who can shoot next to LeBron. And then for the Thunder, it was I would say I would rate it a B. You got a pick out of an expiring contract. Clearly, the market wasn't there.
I'll say it's an A minus for the Thunder. I think an A for the Lakers, A minus for the Thunder. I think in terms of what the Thunder were able to get. I mean, they got a first round pick for Dennis Schroder, which I don't think many teams were willing to offer up. So I don't know. I like it, and obviously for the Lakers, you mentioned all the positives that they got. I mean, there's literally no downside.
It's a win now move for the Lakers, and
which they need to win now.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to go back to back, and Dennis Schroder is definitely a big part and a big asset for them to try and go back to back.
Yeah, which brings us into the next trade, the trade that involves Danny Green. It's actually involving the Philadelphia 76ers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. So this trade sends Danny Green and Terrence Ferguson to the Sixers in exchange for Al Horford, the 34th overall pick in this year's draft, and a 2025 first-round pick. Now, in terms of the positives of this trade, the Sixers get solid shooting. Now, granted, Danny did not have a great season, but when
quote-unquote solid.
If he turns back into form, he's a solid shooter. He's a solid depth player. He's the type of
at least he can play some defense.
He can play some defense, and he's the type of floor spacing. He's the type of player that fits what the Sixers roster should have surrounding Simmons and Embiid.
Floor spacing.
Well, and another thing the Sixers actually did, they offloaded the horrible Al Horford contract. I like Al Horford as a player, but that contract is...
That was pretty much their main, that was their main objective of this deal, was to offload that Al Horford contract, which should have never happened in the first place. You gave up picks for a deal that should have never happened in the first place. So let's not, give credit to Elton Brand for, making up or putting a Band-Aid on a deal that he screwed up himself.
Well, this is not even an Elton Brand move. This
probably a Daryl Morey.
This screams a Daryl Morey.
This
screams a Daryl Morey move to me. I'm not to mention I like Terrence Ferguson as a player. I think he's a nice young player, good depth piece for the Sixers. Another guy who can shoot and play some decent defense. But yeah, the
major vert though.
Yeah, I mean it's he does. But it's a pretty decent trade for the Sixers. Pretty positive on their side. For the Thunder, they get honestly a solid vet for their young team. This honestly, I was mentioning this basically spells the end for Steven Adams. I think he's going to be traded at some point.
That was a given. That was going to happen.
They can't keep Steven Adams' big deal and Al Horford's big deal. Or they might even flip Al Horford for something else. Who knows if someone else is willing to take on that.
Can somebody else take on that contract?
More likely it's going to be Steven Adams who's going to be dealt next. But
Yeah, Steven Adams is on an expiring contract, so it makes sense for him to be dealt. Not to mention, again, even if you don't deal Al Horford, he's a great veteran presence in the locker room. Not to mention, he still is good. Again, he's not as effective maybe as his Celtics days or his Hawks days, but he is still a good player for them.
Look, we saw with what 35-year-old Chris Paul did with the Thunder last season. I think Al Horford might be decent for them, honestly.
Might be. It depends on
if they use him
have
correctly.
they have their new coach now, Mark Daigneault, or whatever his name
Mike
is.
Deneau,
something like that. So it remains to be seen how his offense and his team works. But again, Al Horford is still a very solid player, very good player.
Yeah.
And a stabilizing presence in the locker room.
And then obviously they added more draft picks to the war chest. I think the Thunder now have like 3 first-round picks. They have 3 first, and I think they have like 2 or 3 seconds in this year's draft. Like they have a crazy amount of picks in this year's draft, and going forward, obviously. In terms of some of the cons for this trade, the first one we just kind of touched upon it. Danny Green might be shit for the Sixers. This is honestly a higher possibility than we actually anticipated.
Listen, considering the fact that he's never been garbage in the regular season, I don't know. Over the past few years, he hasn't been garbage in the regular season. It's been the playoffs that he's been garbage.
But the Sixers need him to be a playoff performer.
Yeah, that is true. So maybe he can get away with being bad in the regular season and give everyone hope, and then just kill the hope in the playoffs. Yeah. But it remains to be seen.
But it's only a 1-year deal, so that's the good news for the Sixers, is that if he is shit, well, you just don't re-sign him.
Yeah, and then I think, as you were talking about before, the Steven Adams, I guess, Con, if you're a Steven Adams OKC fan.
Steven Adams is a legend, bro.
He is a legend, bro. He's definitely an OKC legend.
Bro,
for sure.
The one thing I just remember, who was the guy who almost fell and he picked him up?
Mason Plumlee.
Bro,
Mason Plumlee.
That was probably the nicest thing I think I've seen.
Bro, he stopped his layup. He could have gone to and one. He just helped Mason Plumlee up.
Bro, he saved the potential injury right there for like
Aquaman.
That's crazy. Yeah. He's the NBA's version of Aquaman, let's be real.
Yeah, bro.
Nice guy, Steven Adams. It sucks to see him get traded, but I want to see him in a winning culture.
Yeah, definitely. I think he could definitely help a winning team. It would be nice he's one of the all-time great NBA nice guys, so it'd definitely be great for him to get a ring.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next trade we have is the Robert Covington trade. Now, this was immediately accompanied by another trade, which we're gonna get into. So, in terms of the Robert Covington trade, Houston Rockets traded away Robert Covington to the Portland Trail Blazers in exchange for Trevor Ariza, this year's 16th overall pick, and a protected first rounder in 2021. And that was immediately followed by the Rockets trading Ariza and the 16th pick to the Pistons for a future first rounder.
Yeah, so in terms of the Rockets flipping Trevor Ariza in the 16th pick with the Pistons, they mainly did that one to free up the mid-level exception because they have no money and they need to find some way of money if they end up not being able to trade Harden and Westbrook, which we'll touch upon later on in the episode.
They also did purchase the Pistons 2021 second rounder for $6.4 million. Which
Tillman Fertitta's freaking out right now.
I didn't realize a second rounder was worth $6.4 million, but I guess that's contractually that's how much
standard NBA contract. Yeah,
that's a standard second rounder contract probably. Yeah. But in terms of what this trade means for both sides. For Portland especially, I think they get a good 3-and-D player to shore up their wing position. Again, Robert Covington is one of the best role players in the league. So Portland shores up an area of weakness, not to mention the fact that you can put him at the four spot. You can put him at the power forward, and he can work well. Obviously, they were starting Zach Collins and then later Carmelo Anthony.
I mean, this is the type of player I think we've been talking about Portland acquiring for quite some time now. He's just that 3-and-D type of player that they hoped they were going to get with Mo Harkless.
I think they hoped they were going to get with Trevor Ariza. Never really ended up working.
But Robert Covington is a younger version, basically a younger Trevor Ariza, if I'm being real.
And low-key better.
Yeah.
Not low-key, he is better.
He is better. No, he's a great player.
I think one thing, it might spell the end of Rodney Hood, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe Rodney Hood. He did opt out of his contract,
but he's coming off of a bad injury.
So yeah, exactly. So maybe he resigns. Maybe just a familiarity concept, especially in a shortened offseason.
If I'm Portland, I'd still try to keep Rodney Hood because I'd keep that guy off the bench because he's
Yeah.
still a good player off the bench for you. And like I like what Portland's doing. I think this is a solid move. They have Melo, Zach Collins is coming back from injury, so they're getting some depth. Like I mean, obviously they got to address the backup center position with Hassan Whiteside being a free agent. But
side note for Robert Covington, he can go back to playing on the wing instead of playing center.
Yeah.
So he's probably very happy right now that he doesn't have to like guard Anthony Davis in the post and whatnot, bro. That was murder.
Yo,
bro.
even it's funny right now because like when you play 2K against the Rockets, they haven't updated the rosters yet. Obviously, Robert Covington is just like, you just have to abuse the Rockets and just drive every possession.
For the Rockets' point of view, again, I think you touched upon it. They get a pick out of it. They get some extra cap room, which they severely need after Daryl Morey just billed.
Tillman Fertitta's like
trying to
get as much money as he can.
Yeah, he's just trying to get as much free space as he can in the cap. I think the only con you can point to from this situation, again, it's not really a great deal for both sides. It's not really a bad deal for both sides, but I think one disadvantage or con you can see from the situation is that the Rockets had to give up one of the best role players in the league, especially after the season he had this past year with, averaging what was he getting, like 2.5 blocks a game or something like that?
He was in the conversation.
He was good,
defensive
bro.
player of
He
the
was
year.
really good for them. Again, we talked about it before. I think when he got traded to Houston, we talked about his 1 year in Minnesota where he was in the conversation for defensive player of the year. So the fact that the Rockets have to lose a guy who's that good, and not to mention whose contract was as manageable as his contract, I think has to hurt them in the very least.
But let's
even
be
if
real.
they are rebuilding.
But let's be real. We knew at some points a team was going to acquire, try to trade for Robert Covington. We knew because he's just that good of a player, and the Rockets would actually be foolish to keep him for when he's gonna probably want out or ask to leave if they're rebuilding. So
Robert Covington was like low-key the only guy on social media, or in the reports who wasn't asking to leave. I think pretty much everyone else was asking to leave.
Robert Covington's always been a team guy. Let's be real. He's always been a team guy. But no, I definitely I like this trade personally. I think for Portland, I think this is an A move. They didn't really have to give up. Yeah, I don't think they gave up much of anything. I would say
like B plus. Considering Robert Covington.
Dude, honestly speaking, Robert Covington signed for 2 more years at $12 million for this team, giving up a first round pick this year that they're probably not going to really use on anybody valuable, and a future first rounder, and Trevor Ariza, who didn't really do much for you anyways. I don't think you gave up much to get a player of the caliber of Robert Covington.
No, it definitely is a good move, but
for Houston, for Houston, I'd say it's a B. Again, it was a money. It was a money move, but giving up a player like Robert Covington is it hurts. Definitely hurts. So yeah, those are the trades that happened over the last few days. Now, obviously, more will probably happen by the time this episode is out, but we'll cover those all into a future episode. We'll shift gears into some rumors that have been swirling around because where there are trades, there are rumors.
Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Pretty
much off-season.
It's the off-season. Obviously, the biggest rumor that has been going around the league so far is James Harden. James Harden reportedly wants out of Houston. And not just out anywhere. James Harden has his demands. He either wants to go to the Brooklyn Nets or the Philadelphia 76ers via a trade. Now, Harden has 3 years left on his massive deal. He was reportedly offered an extension worth $50 million per year that he turned down.
Apparently, if you look at his IG story, the whole cap thing. So, everyone's kind of unclear on if he meant cap or no cap. So, that's a very ambiguous IG story.
Bro, I'm not going off the IG story, bro. He turned down $50 million per year. So, this
reportedly.
Guy... Okay, reportedly. But this guy wants out. That's like, well, look, he sees the writing on the wall. Houston's trying to rebuild now, retool. Westbrook already wants out. And he wants to go join Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn. Now, Kevin Durant wants this to happen because obviously Kevin Durant doesn't want to work for a championship ever. Personally speaking,
well,
like,
KD did. Him and James Harden did play in OKC. The issue with this would be that the Rockets apparently want either Kyrie or Kevin Durant in the deal for
well,
James
that
Harden.
makes sense.
Yeah, well, why would you give up one of the greatest scorers of all time? You know, who has a couple years left on his contract for
3
pretty
years
much
left.
whatever you can get back from the Sixers or the Nets is not gonna be anywhere close to the value of a guy like James Harden. No matter, I don't care if it's Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, Jarrett Allen all combined. James Harden is one of the top 5 greatest scorers of all time, arguably.
Well, speaking of those players that you just mentioned, if the Nets even make that deal, they have to give up probably Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, probably maybe even have to throw in a Jarrett Allen.
Well, Jarrett Allen already has talked about wanting an extension, and clearly that might not happen.
Well, here, like, you have to give, as the Nets, you have to give up so much of your core that got you to the point where you're at now just to please Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. And this is why I'm so against these superstars, trying to just play, like, it's like playing with each other and, like, breaking contracts, It's like a 5-year deal means nothing anymore. You already know a player can ask out within a year or two, and they'll get what they want because it's a star-driven league.
Yeah. Like, you can't really, again, this is a topic for a whole different episode. I think one we've had, like, a couple times, too. But, it is how the league works at this point.
Well,
I think from a basketball standpoint, too, if you put James Harden on the Nets next to KD, Kyrie, obviously, the firepower is going to be insane. But will it actually lead to winning? What exactly will it work?
I mean, I've seen a video online actually of how it would potentially work in 2K.
Yeah.
It just shows like James Harden dribbling, and then 8 seconds left, he hands it over to Durant who dribbles, and then they randomly hand it to Kyrie who dribbles and pulls up for a 3.
Yeah. Again, it would be very interesting, I think, to see how it worked out. I don't think it would be a very balanced team.
I think it would suck for the league, personally speaking. I just think we just got off the super team era with Golden State.
And just got a bit of parity.
Yeah, and Kevin Durant was the major catalyst as to why people hated the Warriors so much. And now he's doing the same shit that he was doing in Golden State with the Brooklyn Nets. Like, dude, you haven't played a minute for Brooklyn yet. Go actually try to compete for a championship legitimately first before
talking about him not playing for Brooklyn yet. Quickly before we move on, I think what makes this even more interesting is we need to see what Kyrie Irving is going to be like. Obviously, he'll probably be fine because he's been injured throughout his whole career, and it's pretty much that's how the player. This is the type of player that he is, and fans of Kyrie just gotta deal with it. Kevin Durant's gonna be the interesting one because obviously comes off probably the worst injury you can have as a sports player. I think his talent is good enough for him to, especially now with technology and medicine where it's at right now.
Also, his time with the pandemic, he had a lot more time to recover.
But we've been talking about how usually the first year when a player returns is when
they're not the same.
Yeah, they're not the same, and then the second year is when they start to get back to normal. So with this move, with all the moving parts involved, I think it'll be interesting. But also, the Sixers, Daryl Morey connection, I don't know how it will work, but it's definitely an interesting concept.
The Sixers, honestly, it could work if they trade Ben Simmons, which I'm open to.
It could.
I'm open to that one. Like, I like that trade a lot better because I just think for Houston, you're actually getting a valuable asset and Ben Simmons that you can build around. Because Ben Simmons has proven that you can build around him. He can win.
Yeah.
So
you surround him with
shooters.
With shooters, and it can work.
And as a defense, like
I
like that. I like.
He's one of the best two-way players in the league.
And think of Harden and Embiid on the same team. Dude, the lobs are gonna be insane. We've already seen Harden with Dwight Howard.
The issue with that is theoretically it would work, but we saw what happened with James Harden and Dwight Howard at the end too. So
hey man, you know what? I think the Sixers one actually seems a lot more interesting to me. I don't want to see him go to Brooklyn.
Yeah, no.
I also like low-key, I kind of also don't want James Harden to come to the East just because. I mean, man, the Raptors haven't done shit yet, so...
Bro, the Raptors, low-key, everyone in the East got better, and then the Raptors are...
Look, free agency hasn't started yet, so keep that in mind.
Hey, next offseason is what?
Next offseason is what we're waiting for.
Yeah.
Moving on into the next rumor that was swinging around. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but there was a reported rumor that Houston and Washington were talking a trade that surrounds trading Russell Westbrook for John Wall. These are two huge contracts. Obviously, the money completely works, trading them 1-for-1. Now, it doesn't help. I think it helps. It kind of helps Houston because it's a shorter deal with John Wall. But, at the same time, I think it's kind of stupid because both teams will end up back where they started.
It's not going to be a marginal, increase in terms of winning for either team. I think from Washington's point of view, it makes a bit more sense for them because, first of all, we haven't seen John Wall play in 2 years.
Westbrook and Brad Beal.
At least you know what Westbrook gives you,
And Brad Beal can space the floor for Westbrook.
Exactly. So you would now have a great 1-2 combo. Hopefully it would work on the court, but I think I think both players would be able to mesh enough. Again, we've seen issues with Russell Westbrook. But at least, again, you know what you're getting from him as opposed to John Wall, who hasn't played in 2 years and is a player largely reliant on his athleticism. And then not to mention, Washington kind of needs a spark.
They do.
They need a spark.
They're a pretty dead or dry organization right now. Their general manager already said that they don't want to trade Bradley Beal, which I think is incredibly stupid. I think you should at least listen to the offers for Bradley Beal and see what you can get for him. But
I don't know if I would agree with trading him either.
I don't run the Wizards.
I wouldn't trade him.
I will say one thing, though, before we move off this topic. I'm excited for John Wall's return. I think he was one of my favorite players to watch when he was in his prime. And I'm excited to see him come back. I think what I've been hearing of what he's trying to do coming in, because again, he's been away for the game for 2 years. He's had a chance to analyze this game in a whole different light. And
hopefully the jumper is better.
Yeah, I'm excited. I hope John Wall gets back to prominence, gets back to what he, into a high level of player. But, I'm excited for him. Some people aren't, but I am. Moving on into the final trade rumor. Reportedly, the Atlanta Hawks are interested in trading for Gordon Hayward. Now, Gordon Hayward actually is still deciding whether to opt into his $28 million player option.
It's like 27.8 or something. Pretty much like $28 million damn near.
It's a big player option for Gordon Hayward. Now, Gordon Hayward, obviously, his tenure with the Boston Celtics hasn't been the greatest. Oh, crap. It's a $35 million player option. Whoops.
No, that's right now.
Oh, yeah. So, it's $38 million then. No, 34.
Yeah, okay, so $34 million.
$34 million player option for Gordon Hayward. Now, he's deciding whether or not he wants to do it. Boston has given him till
Thursday.
Thursday, which at the time of this recording will be tomorrow, to decide whether or not he wants to opt in or out. Honestly speaking, the Hawks are discussing a sign-in trade. Now, the Hawks have the cap space to acquire him, and I don't think he'd be a bad option. I'm just trying to picture where he'd fit, because I think he would stunt some of the younger players' growth.
The Hawks were discussing a sign-in trade should Gordon Hayward sign an extension. So that is one possibility as well.
How long do you keep Gordon Hayward? That's the question.
I don't know. That's the thing. If he were to opt out and become a free agent, the Hawks would go after him with the cap space that they have. Clearly, the Hawks are in very, trying to build now, win now kind of mode.
And they should, because they could have been a playoff team last year.
Exactly.
I predicted them to be a playoff team.
Not to mention, I think Gordon Hayward definitely be a good fit.
No, he'd be definitely good
for the
player.
Team. He's a defender, facilitator on offense. He can shoot the ball. He's a very good all around player. So I think in that sense he would definitely work. Not to mention the fact that he is a good veteran presence. For a team like the Hawks.
Also, one more thing to know: his role in Boston has kind of diminished a little bit, just based on the fact that
expected.
A lot of Boston's younger talent, and Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum. They've all grown into better players than what Gordon Hayward
Primarily
is.
Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, pretty much.
And again, it's not saying Gordon Hayward's a bad player. He obviously, before his injury, was actually a very good player. But yeah, his injury really set him back a little bit.
Well, it set him back last year. This year, I think he was pretty good. in terms of the fact that he was one of the most efficient.
He was a very
in the league.
efficient player. That I think
And-
has credit to the Brad Stevens.
Yeah, Brad Stevens for sure, but I think for him, like, he was a good player. It's just obviously he became the fourth option on the team. So
Wouldn't
yeah,
have been
fourth option pretty much.
fourth or sometimes fifth, if we're being real.
With Marcus Smart shooting like 10
Yeah.
threes a game.
I think
So-
on a short-term deal, if he signed a short-term with Atlanta, because Atlanta has the cap space.
3 years, I think.
I think it can work. I just don't know what. I think the Hawks can get someone a little bit better, but yeah, it's not a bad option. So those were the rumors and trades that were surrounding the league. Again, more trades and moves are going to come over the next few days. So definitely stay tuned for our next episode where we're going to cover more free agency news. Which finally brings us into the up and under segment for this episode. Now this is basically, taking a look at the players who have opted into their contracts for next season and the players who have opted out. So first off, are you up or under on some of the players who have opted into their contracts? First off is DeMar DeRozan. Second off, Andre Drummond. Evan Fournier is the third one, and Tony Snell is the fourth one.
Again, for this week, we didn't really have an up and under segment, primarily because of the fact that it's been all off-season transactions. Trades, moves.
All trades.
It's all pretty much transactions this whole week. So again, not really an up and under segment, but in terms of some of the names that opted in, I would say I'm up on it. DeMar DeRozan and Andre Drummond, I'm not surprised that they opted in. Obviously, there was some uncertainty if DeMar would opt in or not, considering he was talking about wanting to, go somewhere else or whatever.
Well, that was when the Lakers were interested at first.
The Dennis Schroder thing happened. It kind of killed DeMar
because again, Danny Green would have been used to match salary.
Andre Drummond is not surprising that he opted in. He was not gonna make that money anywhere else.
Well, I mean, I'm annoyed. I'm like, why would you stay in Cleveland? But you were in Detroit for so long.
Hey, if somebody offered you like $30 million, would you not take it? I would take it, bro.
I guess.
The ones I'm surprised about are Evan Fournier and Tony Snell.
Evan Fournier is a surprising one.
Yeah, I don't know. Clearly, I guess the market just wasn't there. Again, we're expecting maybe they would opt out because the market would have gotten them a better contract. But clearly, with all of the uncertainty going on in the offseason, all of the COVID-19 situations, the ramifications of everything that's happened, clearly they felt that their market just wasn't to their standard, and they opted in. So I can't blame him for
Evan Fournier has a $17 million player option that he took. It's not horrible, but you can honestly see a team offer him more money.
Well, clearly not. And same with Tony Snell, who I think had a
Tony Snell's a more interesting one.
I think he had a $12
million.
$12 million.
Yeah, 12.1.
So I think those ones were particularly interesting to me. But again, clearly the market just this offseason in particular is gonna be being a weird one, So it's been an interesting one. So I think just in terms of their market value wasn't at what they expected it to be. So again, it makes sense for them to opt out. Speaking of opting in, speaking of opting out, we have some opt out names that happened. Anthony Davis opted out of his contract, again expected. Jeremy Grant, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Rodney Hood, as we mentioned before, and Wesley Matthews. So are you up or under on some of the guys that opted out of their contracts?
I'm up on it. I think it's expected. These ones were all expected. Anthony Davis, we already knew he was going to re-sign for that max extension with the Lakers. Jeremy Grant, we knew he's going to get a bigger contract just based off the type of player that he is in the season he had.
Especially the postseason that I think against the Clippers and the Lakers, especially, the type of postseason that he had.
And Jeremy Grant's always been a great player. We've acknowledged that, so he's definitely looking to get paid. KCP, because Clutch Sports, he had a freaking no trade clause in his contract.
Well, also the fact is that he played very well for them.
He definitely earned it, especially in the finals.
He earned a raise. Definitely. Especially with all the crap that he took from Lakers fans and what fans in general. He definitely earned it, considering how he played in the postseason.
Looking at Rich Paul's track record, he's going to get paid.
Yeah.
Rodney Hood, that one's a little interesting to me, just based on the fact that he's coming off of a bad injury, but I feel like he will work something out with Portland to re-sign. And Wes Matthews, we kind of expected. He's playing on a $2.5 million contract, and he was arguably the Bucks' best defender in the playoffs against Miami.
Yeah, the Lakers are apparently looking to get Wesley Matthews, and that would be
That would be
a
insane.
very, very good pickup for them.
That'd be insane.
Side note, apparently, according to LeBron haters, getting Dennis Schroder and Wesley Matthews now makes LeBron what was it, like, super team builder. Apparently, Dennis Schroder and Wesley Matthews
They're just
make you a super team now for LeBron.
Look, Dennis Schroder and Wesley Matthews are good role players, and as a championship team, like any contending team would take these two players, any of them. So it's not about whether it's LeBron's team or not. I mean, the Clippers would take these guys if they actually had assets. Instead of way off peak.
It's
You got
the
to engage
needle.
them.
The needle moves for LeBron haters. I think would be So it's a.
I mean,
funny
for the
situation.
most part, most of these were kind of expected. But with that, that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various podcasting platforms. You can follow us on. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio. Basically, wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us with the Up and Under Podcast. Also, check out our social media: Twitter and Instagram at @N Podcast. Facebook.com/Up and Under Podcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news and trade as they occur. Also, check out our website, upandunderpodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's also a place where we write blog posts about every episode. So if you don't have time to listen to the full thing, you can read about it. So definitely check that out. And finally, our off-season coverage is going to continue. Next week, we're going to cover a lot of the free agency signings that are going to occur over the next few days. So stay tuned for the craziness. But with that, that concludes this week's episode, and we'll see you guys all in the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.